Why does a surrender option exist when giving up is a report category? Is that a real question? Like, you know, there's a big difference between trying to surrender a game and like literally ceasing playing the game that is still going, right? The report penalty for giving up is combined with like no longer trying to win. If your team wants to play the game out, you're expected to continue to try to win. So if the surrender vote fails, you're expected to continue to try to succeed. And so yes, we are willing to let you leave the game, but if you are still in the game, you need to be trying to win the game. The surrender option was removed. What would happen to League? There would be a large number of games that would be lost, but people would be stuck at them, and then they would be miserable. The surrender option is there to allow people to opt out of losing experiences that they would not enjoy playing out. If you want to understand what a game without surrender can feel like at times, I would encourage you to go play Dota and play a game, let's say, with an early game team comp that can no longer win versus a late game team comp that cannot or will not end the game. Many games of Dota that I've played have been over at 20 minutes and then they go on for another 20. Ranked Dota has surrender now? Oh, awesome. That's great. Big win. It's been a while since I played Dota. It used to not have surrender. No game lost is lost before it ends. That is true. But many games are lost enough, I would say. Like, yes, technically the entire enemy team could accidentally DC. That is 100% true. But many games are lost enough that, like, requiring players who are not enjoying that game experience to be in it for another 20 minutes is probably just not a good thing to do to them. If you don't want to play for 5%, that's on you. Yeah, which is why surrender takes 4 people, right? We basically say the vast majority of the people on the team have to want to do it. And if they don't, then you stay in the game. Like right now, there's enough people on our team that want to keep playing, and so we keep playing, right? But if the vast majority of our team wanted out, like it would make sense to let them out in a game like this. Surrender takes only 3? No, it doesn't. It takes 4. It's always been 4. Are you talking about in like blind pick or swift like quick play or whatever it is? This is ranked, dude. It went to 3 for like 3 patches and you changed it back? Definitely didn't. And if it did, it was a bug or it happened a very, very, very long time ago. Maybe it happened at some point. Maybe my memory is foggy. But there's no way that ranked has been 3-man surrender in ranked. You are misremembering. Ranked used to be 15 minutes with 5 people and 20 minutes was 4 people. And then we changed it to 15 minutes was 4 people. So it used to be harder to surrender before 20 minutes because it required the entire team. The reason we changed that is because it turns out it's pretty miserable to be in a game where 4 people went out. And on top of that, we find that when players want to surrender, they are usually correct that they are going to lose. Obviously not always, but when you look at like when players try to surrender and then the actual like leads that the enemy team had and like the likelihood that they'd be able to make a comeback and stuff, players generally tend to be fairly good, if everybody on the team wants to do it, that is, at knowing when they should surrender. Like, if one guy on the team is trying to surrender, that guy might just be a whiner. That guy, like, might not know what they're talking about. Who knows? Game could be winnable. But if 4 people on a team want to surrender, that combined consensus is usually fairly accurate as to whether that game was winnable. Isn't that a self-fulfilling property? To some degree it is. If people want out of the game, they're less likely to win it because they're already in a bad mental state. If I'm 5-0 Kassadin and all my teammates want to surrender, I just don't get to carry? Yes, correct. If you're 5-0 Kassadin and you have 4 members of your team think the game is lost, then in that case, you won't get to carry. And what we have seen from the data is the vast majority of situations that are like that, your teammates are correct and that you will lose the game. Because again, players generally tend to be like, when when the group of people in the game think they're going to lose, they tend to be like fairly correct on having games that are like low chance to succeed. It's also the case, however, that if you're a 5-0 Kassadin, it is less likely that your teammates will surrender. Obviously, that's not always the case, but if you're a 5-0 Kassadin and you say things like, hey, I'm a 5-0 Kassadin, by the way, like, you're going to have more teammates in more games going to be like, yeah, even though we feel like we're losing, we could potentially come back here. Oh, and until you understand the data that I'm talking about, because some people are just like, what is this data he's been talking about? What we looked at is we basically looked at, okay, when a surrender vote is called and 4 people vote yes on it, this is back when you had to have 5 people to end the game, because before 20 minutes it needed 5 instead of 4. But when a surrender vote is called and 4 people vote yes on it, how likely is that game to be something that can be came back from? In terms of what are the goal differentials, and then what are the actual outcomes? Because again, the game would continue, and then we could see how many of these games that tried to be surrendered with 4-1 actually ended up in games where people would be able to win, you know, past 20 minutes. And it was highly likely that if you were trying to surrender at 15 minutes with 4 people, that those 4 people were correct about that game being winnable. I don't think you can fully explain the data to people that have never surrendered no matter what mentality. So the thing I'm trying to do with this data is to help you understand like why we do this, like why we allow you to surrender, things like that, and like why we changed it. But yes, if you're the person that's saying never surrender no matter what, you are technically right. Like if you want to win the absolute maximum number of games of League of Legends, you should 100% never surrender ever. That will get you the highest win rate you could possibly get. It is win rate negative to ever surrender the game. You should never do that if you want to win as many games as possible. The catch, though, is that you're weighing that value against how enjoyable it is to be trapped in a game that you as a player are perceiving that you're going to lose. And that is often a very, very deeply unenjoyable experience. And I want to like also make the difference between like a game you think you're fairly sure you're going to lose versus a game where you're like, you're losing, right? Like it's fine to have people in losing games, because a lot of losing games you can come back. A lot of losing games you can catch up, things like that. But when you're in a game where it feels completely hopeless and you feel like you're trapped, that's generally a fairly bad experience. And so I would argue it's because of things like that, it's good to allow players, if the vast majority of the team agree to it, to get out of games that feel like they're just trapped in like no success cases. There's also another thing where it's like, and that is the idea of win rate per hour. Somebody actually put this in chat, and I think that's a reasonable thing to think about. Is like, well, if you could only play a certain number of games a night, sometimes it's just best to say GG, scoop it up, and play a new game, right? Like sometimes it's like, yeah, I mean, maybe we could win this game, but it's extremely unlikely. So I'd rather like get a fresh start with a fresh try sometimes, right? So win rate per hour actually is a meaningful thing to think about when talking about a player experience in ranked.